Hello, good afternoon po everyone. I'm Tats. I'm an intern at the Salt Institute. So, welcome po to day 3 of ADLLX 2021. So, for the first session in this room, we have Ma'am Anne Nicole Arellano, who teaches Purposive Communication and Global Voices at the Ateneo de Manila University. And she'll be telling us all about collaborative approaches to discussion boards. So, Ma'am Arellano, the floor is yours na po.
Thank you, Ms. Stats. Okay, so good afternoon. Let me just start my timer. Okay. So thank you everybody for attending this very short sharing. I'd like to begin by saying that the approach that I will be sharing today is nothing really that revolutionary, and it's really just a fruit of a lot of experimentation throughout the school year, and answering questions such as how do I get my students to really genuinely love literature even if we are in this online setting. Okay, so let me start already. I'll just give you the context of this talk, or of this sharing. I'll tell you, let me just introduce myself very briefly and the why and wherefore of this particular approach. So I think a lot of us here, of course, are teachers, and maybe back then when we were prior to the pandemic, where this meme, no, in this particular meme right here, the dog with flexing his muscles, in normal classes, we're very strict and very no nonsense. But somehow we find ourselves here in online teaching, begging the students to say something during synchronous sessions. No? So please, guys, say something, like a puppy, begging students to turn on their cameras or to at least say something in response to our questions. Well, I'm such a teacher that I'm an instructor from the English department. And it's my first time to teach in college last school year. And it's also my first time to teach online. But prior to that, I have had 10 years of experience teaching in basic education. And to just give you a bit of context, the approaches that I will talk about today, I employed it in 3 classes: purposive communication, in global voices and encounters, and in a intersession class that I'm teaching this summer, which is Shakespeare's tragedies. But most of my examples come from purposive communication and global voices and encounters. And I teach freshman students. So last year, the freshman students, I found generally they were shy. Some select few were confident and very excited to introduce themselves and really make themselves known. But generally they were shy and apprehensive, and understandably still finding their places in the university. And all of this they're doing in an online setting. So to continue this context, like I said, I have been teaching for a while, about 10 years, and in those 10 years, I think I have developed a certain way of teaching literature already, which is, I believe personally that teaching literature is not a didactic thing or a lecturing kind of thing, but more dialectical. So it's we have to foster discussion, genuine dialogue. Well, of course, close reading skills have to be there, but a lot of the work is done through literary circles or Socratic circles. That's what I think teaching of literature is. But then, being thrust into the situation of online teaching, there are certain demands of the medium that maybe I cannot really fully enforce these things that I think that I believe in, in teaching literature. And what are these demands? These current mediums demands. Well, number one, I think a lot of us here also went to or learned about ADL online, went through the ADL course, and one of the things there, diba, is we have to have less synchronous sessions. Not naman totally wala, pero but less, considerably less. So not, and it's not just because that's what ADL says, but also because it's fatigue. It's tiring to log into Zoom every single day. And of course, our students would have Wi-Fi problems, and we also have Wi-Fi problems. So and another thing that we picked up from ADL is we should design few but meaningful content. And before, literature teachers, we're sanay to have really a lot of readings. So that's another challenge that we literature teachers, English teachers have to overcome. And of course, like I said, the course should be dominantly asynchronous, and synchronous sessions are to be used sparingly. So this is the context, and I think it's a context that a lot of us are already familiar with. So, and I know that if I force a lot of synchronous sessions for the sake of literary circles, for the sake of creating the same atmosphere as I have before the pandemic, no, in a literature classroom, I'll end up like this guy here. All the bells and whistles, fur and costumes and things, trying to engage the students to talk online, and they're just not having it. They're just not engaged, right? So if I do this, plenty synchronous sessions. So the question now that I had when I was developing a collaborative way of approaching the discussion boards is this. Like I said, my context is, I'm a literature teacher. So my question was this: how do I foster genuine dialogue and interactive discussions in the online setting? How do I simulate the feeling of a literature class online given these limitations of content, time, and liveness? So we're here now, we're learning in the online setting, but we're always aware that we are limited by content, by time, and by liveness. So that is why throughout the year, I have tweaked this approach of to discussion boards, and I call it led by learners. It's a way, it's a design of employing or executing discussion boards that have these four things in mind. First, that discussion boards are carefully designed to have a summative value. I do not mean here that they're used for summative assessments. What I mean by this is that the questions are designed to allow the students to synthesize all the texts that they have read throughout the module, right? Number two, that these discussion boards are linked and enriched by the synchronous sessions. So, we're encouraged to have very few synchronous sessions. I personally would have one synchronous session a week. And because of that limitation, I thought, okay, I have to make the synchronous session meaningful because it's only once a week. And number three, interactive and collaborative. And four, it is led and synthesized by what I call discussion leaders. So I'll show this later. So when I was thinking of a way to engage the students in the discussion boards and in the synchronous sessions, I thought that, and I put version 2.0 here because this approach has been, I changed it several times mid-semester, mid-quarter, and then in the next quarter, I would change it, and then in the next, I would change it, things like that. But the more refined version of this approach is that I had decided that there would only be 1 to 2 discussion boards per module, and that the discussion boards only has 3 to 4 questions or tasks. I would like to emphasize the tasks because not all of the things in the discussion board are questions, but some of them are things that they can do to integrate the digitalness of the medium. I'll show an example later. And they can only answer these 3 to 4 questions if they develop an understanding and have done their close reading of the text. But what I did in the more refined version is that the student will only choose 1 question to answer from a menu of of questions. So again, it's not anything new. It's the normal way of doing the discussion boards. But I will show you later what the new-ish thing is here. So here's this an example of some questions. So like I said, in a given module, only two texts. I would only have one discussion board, and that discussion board is a synthesis of mga 3 to 4 texts. So here's an example of some questions or tasks about 4 poems that we took up in a particular module in my global voices class. So if you look at the questions, there, for example, number 1 is more of a compare and contrast of 2 poems. And number 2 is more of a personal question. Give an example in which religious identity has influenced your behavior, things like that. Number 3 is more of an argumentative question. And number 4 is more of a creative question where they're asked to add to a particular poem. So, and I emphasize that because the students only pick one in the discussion board as the requirement, and they fulfill that already. So they pick one lang from all of these options, and then that's it for their requirement. They can do more, but that's optional. So okay, and where does the interactive and collaborative thing come in? So if you have explored this in Canvas, you can actually, when you design a discussion board, you can make group them into smaller groups so that the student is only really interacting with a smaller group and not 30 other people or 29 other people. So you'll see later, I'll show you a screenshot of an example of this. In this way, they get to know who their classmates are, and how they think, right? And also be enriched with a smaller group. Sometimes kasi it's daunting for a student to look at the discussion board and see 40 entries there, and then have to sift through that to get a feel of the discussion. So in this approach, in this widget or function of Canvas, we can do this actually. So we can subdivide, we can divide the discussion groups into different into smaller groups of students. And here's something that I did in version 3 of this. I tweaked this already after seeing some feedback from the students. But the students, siguro by version 3 nga, I think quarter 2 or quarter 3, I did not ask the students to reply anymore. Before kasi, or usually in the discussion board, diba, they post and then they have to reply to someone, required pa. So I thought that really generated a lot of superficial replies and parang walang meaning or walang substance. So what I did with the refined version is that students are not required to reply, but their only options are 2. So they can answer a question, any question from the options, or they can just reply to someone substantially. I'll show you an example of this. But so here's what I was talking about. I divided the discussion board into 3 groups, so that again, so you see that discussion board 2.11, 2.22, 2.13, iba-ibang groups yan of students, so that they're only interacting with a small group. And parang mas ma-encourage sila to really read through the discussion boards. Tapos nag-iiba siya. Every new discussion board, it's a different group naman. They're gonna be grouped with a different people. And if you look at the discussion board directions, kina-copy paste ko to every discussion board para alam nila yung directions, very clear yung directions dun sa discussion board. And they know that in order to complete that discussion board, dalawa lang, either of the 2 lang ang gagawin nila. Either they answer one of the questions there, or they reply to a classmate to build on their idea, incorporating their own particular answer to the same question. you can see here in point number 2, if you are a discussion leader, simply comment discussion leader as your entry to the discussion board. Kasi later I will explain what discussion leaders are. But obviously from this point, you know already, or you would guess, that discussion leaders don't have to contribute on the discussion board that they are responsible for. So, and to encourage replies, again, like I said, I told the students, no need for a required reply, but an additional engagement will earn you bonus points. So +1 for every additional engagement. And a lot of students take this up because a lot of students want bonus points. But I was telling them, oh no, okay, that's 15 minutes up in my timer at least. But I would tell them na every additional engagement will get them a bonus point, pero dapat substantial. So hindi yung I agree lang or I do not agree, things like that. Here is an example. 4 minutes pa. Okay, thank you, Ms. Tats. Okay, here is an example of a student who just replied to another. So he did not answer any question, but he just replied to another student. And I think it was very meaningful, and it took the discussion forward. So this is an example from MLit 127, Shakespeare's Tragedies. He's replying to a student who said that Macbeth is like Saddam Hussein. And he replied, yeah, okay, I agree with your, and then I like it because he uses his own knowledge of political science to enrich the conversation. And that already accomplished his assignment for that discussion board. Yeah, I'm sorry, sorry for the noises because my house is being renovated and then there are dogs. So, okay, here is another what do you call this? Another example of another student who just replied to someone else. This is about a poem called The Unknown Citizen. And as you can see, he really tried to take the discussion forward. So I'd like to point out how you mentioned, etc., etc. I won't read through it anymore. So, yun. And of course, the last 2 points here. So they have a summative, the discussion boards are designed to have a summative value. They're interactive and collaborative. And I designed them so that they can be linked and be enriched by the synchronous session, the weekly synchronous session. So what I did is at the beginning of the course, I asked for volunteers to be discussion leaders. So and I would have a lot of volunteers naman. And if there are few, then we just adjust along the way. I ask mid-quarter who else wants to be a discussion leader. But the idea is that for every discussion board, there are 3 groups usually. And in each group, there is one discussion leader who is not required to answer any questions in the discussion board, but their only responsibility is to look at the discussion board and summarize and synthesize it, highlighting the interesting answers that they see, and sort of looking at it and maybe getting 2 or 3 key ideas from the discussion board. And when we go to the synchronous session, they are given a few minutes to talk about their summary and synthesis. So during the synchronous session, what happens is that I'm not the only one who talks or lectures or repeat. Usually, diba, we repeat what we say in the modules lang, or ask them, sige, what's not clear, things like that. It's not only me, but I have 3 other people who are students who are also lecturing, or who will be speaking for 5 to 10 minutes about the discussion boards that they're assigned to. After they talk, I process it a little bit and then give more questions to the rest of the live class. And then if there are interesting discussion board answers that the discussion leaders bring up, we can probe the individual or the person to, I don't know, maybe expound some more, things like that. Okay, so here's some photos of people, some discussion board leaders in the classes that I was able to record and save in my hard drive. But kasi usually I would save it in the Zoom and then na-delete na lahat nung mga recordings in Zoom. So here are the ones that I was able to save. So as you can see, some students, they create a PowerPoint presentation, although I tell them it's not naman na needed. No, but yeah, they go up there. I would have 3 to 4 other students with me in the synchronous session. You know, uh, they're summarizing and synthesizing and giving their own insights to the discussion. I have 1 minute left. So, and these were the suggestions that helped me tweak the practice. When I received my evaluations, there are some feedback that helped me refine this, such as these 4 points. There are people who, there were students who said that the discussion boards were too many, so that's why I decided to really cut that into one lang per module. And they really don't like the fact that they had to reply to other people as a requirement. Parang it felt very forced. So yon. So these were some of the suggestions that helped me tweak the practice. And in the end, there were other feedback that I think helps me evaluate or assess that this particular method worked. So there is a student who said that I like how I liked how there were discussion leaders to summarize our answers, and then it expanded their view on the topic. It's effective in fostering genuine discourse, which was my goal, and this allowed us to interact and learn from one another. It's thought-provoking. They learned more from their classmates than from merely reading the selection for academic sake. So, and I think here are some of my insights. I'm ending already. That enabling the students to choose what questions to answer in a particular discussion board um, resulted in more interest on their part and genuine interaction and answers as well. And the discussion boards, some insights also I gained, discussion boards can either be tiresome or great tools for fostering community and collaborative discussion. Socratic circles can't be done now, but I think this is the best thing we can do to mimic the dialecticness of a literature class. And in the discussion leaders, what I really like about it and what I have realized is that not only do they summarize the contents of the discussion board, but it allows some variety in the synchronous session as well. That, you know, the synchronous session is few, once a week lang, and so I figured I have to make it meaningful and as interactive as possible, and you know, hindi lang sana ako yung person who appears in the synchronous session. It also is effective in fostering familiarity and acquaintanceship between students because I deliberately ask the discussion leaders to be intentional and really credit the people that they're quoting in the discussion board when they find a great insight there. So they would say, according to this and that classmate, blah, 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 and this and this classmate agrees with him or her, etc. So lumalabas yung names nila and things like that. Sorry. So here's, and last, as a teacher, personally, it also is easier for me because it becomes my springboard for discussion. And you know, I use it also as entry points for the discussion in the synchronous session. And it allows me, you know, a faster way of identifying what else to emphasize and clarify during the synchronous session. So that's it. Thank you for listening. And yeah,
So thank you, Ma'am Arellano, for that enlightening talk. We have a few minutes pa, so I'll read out some of the questions in the chat box for you
okay.
to answer. Okay, so the first one, may I ask how discussion leaders are graded as opposed to those who had to contribute in the discussion board? Is there a deadline for everyone to contribute so the discussion leader has time to read and synthesize in time for the sync session?
Yes, that's a great question. So I wasn't able to include that detail. But let's say that the synchronous session is Friday. I would usually have it Fridays for my literature class. Wednesday, dapat the discussion posts are already in. so that the discussion leaders have 2 days to synthesize and summarize. And as a because I don't know if I'm too generous, pero if they are able to deliver the synthesis and summary on the synchronous session, I give them an automatic perfect score na for the discussion, that particular discussion board. So may rubrics din naman for the discussion board entries. I can show that to you if you want. But if they're a discussion board leader, I don't use the rubrics and I give them an automatic bonus point na perfect score. So yun. That's why marami din nagvo-volunteer.
Okay, thank you for the answer. Next question po. What's the ideal number of students in a class in order for this to be effective? Because it can't be helped that not all are participative.
Right. I think I cannot answer what's the ideal, but I'll just tell you my reality or what happened to me. The classes that I handle are mga 30 students per section. So then during discussion boards, at least the refined version na, yung refined version nito, I would divide them into 3 groups every time there's a discussion board. So then that would be about 10 students, sometimes may 9 or 12. And then pagdating sa synchronous session, they would have, each discussion board leader would have 5 to 10 minutes to talk. So I think 30 in a class is manageable.
Okay, next question po. Would discussion boards be a better way or the same as than individually required one-page reaction or reflection papers as an assessment method?
I guess it depends on what your goal is, Sir Armando or Mr. Miklat. Kasi pag one-page reaction or reflection papers, I think if what you're assessing is really their ability to reflect and to interpret a particular text, then okay lang yung one-page reaction and reflection papers. But the discussion boards kasi have this dimension of the publicness of their answers. So pag nilagay nila sa discussion board, it's public na. So, and they're allowed to learn from it, to get from it, to react to it, and things like that. So I guess it's if you just take the questions for discussion boards as questions, you can use them as reflection papers, you know. Pero the dialecticness or the dialogueness is taken out for one-page reaction papers or reflection papers. I think it depends on what you're trying to assess.
Okay, thank you. So that's a very Atenista answer. It depends.
Yeah.
Okay, next question po. Can the reporting of discussion leaders on top of other items in the agenda be manageable in a 1-hour class?
Yeah, okay. So that's an interesting question because the first versions of this lagi akong kahol sa oras. I'm always like pressed for time when I do this in a synchronous session kasi nga I wanted to do like close readings pa, for example, like let's zoom in on a particular line or a poem and really just appreciate it. Those are the first versions, but I had figured na close reading takes a lot of time, and guiding the students to do close reading takes a lot of time, especially if I want to do it live. So what I did with close reading was I just really developed, one module dedicated to close reading lang. How to annotate, how to describe, how to interpret, and things like that. So that when we get to the synchronous session, we're just discussing the things that, how the text relates to the world. And so with that, there is, I think, enough time in a 1-hour class for 3 people, for me to talk a bit about how, my insights on the module and the texts, and 3 other people to also share what they had found insightful in the discussion boards. Yeah.
Okay, another question from this person po. Is it possible for you to show how you group discussion boards into smaller groups?
Okay lang ba, Tats? Can
Oh, yes po.
mabilis lang naman. Sige.
5
So,
minutes pa po.
I will kunyari create a discussion board. This is an old course. Or actually, sorry, let's just do it in a new course because I don't know if I can do it in an old course. In a course that I'm doing now. Discussions. So here, so let's say, let's create a discussion. So you do your title, right? And then the content, right here. So allow threaded replies, allow liking, graded. So check all of these if you want it to be graded. And then you check this one. This is a group discussion, right? So when you check that, select a group category. You can enter a new group category, DB1, right? And then you can randomly split students into 3 groups, let's say, right? And then save. And then when you create it, I'll save it. Let's see what happens there. So you visit each group. It creates these links, right? Then if you click it, it will take you to the discussion board page, and you will only see the replies of the students who are grouped under that discussion board group. You'll see also here under people who are the ones in that group. So this is a class of 30, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 lang yung people in this particular discussion board. Yeah, there.
Okay, thank you for the demonstration, ma'am.
Yeah.
Dami palang questions. I think we can accommodate a few more. Next one po, how much weight in the grades did you give to discussion boards? And the follow-up question is, what would you recommend moving forward?
So yung grade for the discussion boards in purposive communication and GVE, the subjects that I teach, it's determined kasi by the department. So so for purposive communication, it's not divided into discussion to type of assessment like quiz, discussion board, etc. But it's divided by the module. So for example, module 1 and 2 has 20%. Module 3 and 4 has 30%. So that's for purposive communication. And for GVE, the discussion boards are the weight is 10%. That's departmental. That's because like that's determined by the teachers. So what do I recommend moving forward? Yeah, I think, maybe I'm not sure if this is something that you can do all the time. So you might want to vary it. Maybe one module has this particular approach, another module has a different approach, like of discussion leaders. So and I think this particular method for me works or would work in text heavy subjects. So and subjects that prior to the pandemic used to benefit a lot from discussions or from live spontaneous discussions. So I think that's that's it.
Okay, last question na po. Do you think it will be helpful to create a free-for-all discussion board at the end of each module so that students can use this to ask questions or give additional insights about the module in general?
Free for all. I will interpret the free for all as the whole class. Is that, I don't know, is that what free for all means? But to give additional insights, yeah, I think another option para I guess mas not so heavy could be a Padlet, like an exit ticket via Padlet. So that's another perhaps alternative to that. Any topic? Oh, okay. Yeah, okay. Any topic on the whole module, yeah, I think that's a great idea. Just for them to, share and unload whatever they think of that's outside the bounds of the questions. So yeah, I think that's a great idea. And maybe it's a little bit more difficult to have a discussion leader to create a synthesis on that, but it's not impossible. They just maybe need more time to synthesize that particular discussion board. Yeah, it can be a discussion board, or I can also imagine it as like a Padlet exit ticket kind of thing.
Okay, so it's 2:41 now. We ended the month promptly. Thank you so much, Ma'am Aureliano, and thank you for everyone who attended this session and for who asked questions and participated. So,
Thank
ayun,
you.
thank you again for the really insightful session. For everyone in all the participants, I mean, you're free to leave the room and go to your next room, your next session, or you can also stay here in room 7 if your next session is still in this room. Um, for the next session, we'll be beginning promptly at 2:50 in the afternoon. So again, thank you everyone. Let's take a short break.